what I'd like to talk about today is mentoring, what's called the mentoring profile inventory. It follows on some of the work that Dan's done, in fact, some wonderful stuff with the teaching perspectives inventory. But I'm just going to walk you through a few ideas and hopefully you might go away and you might actually try it yourself. Mentoring in this context is mentoring of student teachers in the practicum setting, and that's an area where it's a great interest of mine and I spend a whole lot of time doing that. I would like to say, do you go up or down? I'd like to say this is all my own work, but it isn't, unfortunately. All these people did it, actually. A whole group of people from Richmond. These are teachers in Richmond, teachers and administrators in Richmond. And I've actually taken the photograph. You might recognise some of them. And then Valerie, Wendy, John and Galen were involved in the project too. So I actually had a very small role, unfortunately. But anyway, enough about them. Back to me. I just thought I'd run you through what my experiences were on practicum. If you've done a practicum, you can relive your experiences. My first practicum, I did 3 practicum, was South Melbourne Elementary School. This is actually the school itself. And they gave me a K1 and I went out to the school. I didn't meet my school advisor. We were 6 students in the school. We were just in the staff room by ourselves pretty much. And I remember my first lesson with K1 and I had to teach, and I thought I'd teach them skipping, which is a wonderfully active, I was a phys ed teacher by the way, I was out there and I thought again. And I don't know whether you've ever tried to teach skipping to grade K1, but they pretty much can't skip. So my whole lesson went completely out the window. I mean, I remember standing there in the yard thinking, what am I going to do with all these little kids? It was hard enough to get them in a line, you know, let alone teach me how to skip. And we spent the rest of the lesson actually improvising and making letters on the ground with our skipping rope, the letter A and the letter B, etc., till the bell went and I could go back inside and escape from these little young children. But my school advisor, I don't have any recollection of my school advisor being there, advising me, looking at my lesson plan, suggesting that it might be the wrong thing to do, etc. Things didn't get much better. They sent me from an ex-practicum to Ivanhoe Grammar School, which is a very expensive boys' grammar school in Melbourne, the city of Melbourne. And I remember my school advisor at that stage had done 1 year. He was a sheet metal worker. He'd been employed at the school because he was a basketball expert and he was teaching phys ed. And he was actually my school advisor. He had no interest in me. All I remember, he used to eat oranges all the time. He used to have this big orange sort of fuzz around his face. And he used to send me off to do whatever I liked with the children. And I remember the most devastating lesson, I was teaching football on the Oval in Australia. And in those days when I was in the phys ed program, University of Melbourne, you used to had to wear navy tracksuit trousers and a white tracksuit top. That was the outfit you had to wear on practicum. And I remember one of these lads actually kicked the ball right in the middle of my back, a muddy football, and left an imprint right in the middle back of my tracksuit. And actually their class in particular then decided they weren't going to listen to me anymore. I don't know whether you've ever had this experience. You're standing there and you're asking kids to do something and they all decided, they were about grade 9 or 10, all turned and started walking off the Oval without my direction. I mean, I can clearly remember this. And the caretaker gardener, because it was a very expensive school, they had beautiful gardens, actually sent them back when they got to the end of the Oval, said they had to come back to my class. This was the caretaker actually in charge of my class. Am I speaking too fast? Probably. I'll slow down. My last experience on practicum was actually at South Melbourne Technical School. I was a math teacher as well. And there was a strike in Melbourne. We have lots of strikes in Melbourne. I always thought it was interesting when I came to Canada. You hardly have any strikes. But we strike at the drop of a hat in Australia. And anyway, the teachers were out on strike. They were working to rule, and my school advisor happened to be the union president local for that area. And he had no time to spend with me. I mean, he was so busy managing all this. And not only that, the schools had become so untidy and dirty that they were successively closing down classrooms because they weren't being cleaned. And I had to teach mathematics in the Albert Park rowing shed, which was across the road from where the school was. And you can imagine it was grade 10 matrices, I actually remember. And those kids had no interest in what I was doing. I had a little blackboard, you know, a little easel, and they were looking at all these gleaming boats all around the room, etc. But my school advisor was nowhere to be seen. And maybe that explains why I'm such a bad teacher, actually. So you could have been forgiven for thinking that what you were going to dream to have this lovely experience actually turned out to be the school advisor, pretty much invisible, had no interest at Ivanhoe Grammar School and was just too busy to deal with me as a student teacher. I could have been a brilliant student teacher. I never thought of that. Maybe they didn't need to help me. But that was my experience of working with school advisors as a student teacher myself. I was a first year teacher at East Doncaster High School. We got jobs the first year we came out. I was a phys ed teacher, full-time phys ed. We had no gymnasium. And I remember I was in the geography staff room. Have I told these stories before? If you're getting bored. I was in the geography staff room. The school was on 2 levels. A big quadrangle up the top end of the school was a big school, and a brand new school, and another quadrangle down the other end. And the coordinator of student teaching practice was on the top quadrangle in the English staff room. And the secondary school, we hardly saw him. It was her, rather. And I was down with the geography teachers and the 2 phys ed teachers. And I remember one day, there was a knock on the door, seriously, and I answered the door, and this person said, "I'm looking for Mr. Clarke." And I said, "Yeah, I'm Mr. Clarke." And he said, "I'm your student teacher." And I remember, really? And what had happened, in fact, well, it still happens, I guess, on the staff room, they put up a list to say people who want to supervise student teachers. Well, someone had written my name in on the list. I hadn't even seen it on the staff room notice board. This is true. And this person at the top of the school had no sense. We were a big school, it's a brand new school, so they're all new teachers, had no sense that I was a first year teacher. And had assigned this student teacher to me. I remember him, John. And I was the first year teacher. I hardly knew about teaching myself. And so we ended up working together. I mean, it was great because he knew things I didn't know, and he could teach me, and I knew a few things that might. And so we finished up working together. But in all my time, I spent the next 11 years at East Donny. I never was offered any formal opportunity for the role I was playing as school advisors. I finished up enjoying student teacher. They're just a delight. I had 20 in the time, the 11 years I was there. But no one ever, there was no opportunity for professional development whatsoever. So what the assumption that you might take away from this is that it requires no special preparation. A teacher is a teacher is a teacher, and we've heard that one before. It's a job that anyone can do. There's not much selection process, and requires no ongoing support. I mean, you could from those sort of stories and those sorts of backgrounds, and if you're like me and you get a student teacher and you carry on, you stumble along and you do what you can, you could be forgiven for thinking that this was the case. So what can we say about school advisor professional development? Well, historically it's been university directed with fairly uneven results. It goes up and down, up and down, up and down. This is actually the Dow Jones Index actually from the last few months. I just thought I'd show you, but it sort of roughly approximates the Dow Jones lately. That's what it's been like. We've never been very successful. I spent the first part of my career at East Doncaster High School, at University of British Columbia, doing workshops in schools with school advisors. And you get 8, you get 10, and Sydney supports me to do the ED 432, and you might get 12 at that. One year I had 36 when Charles Unglider was running the program, and had to get Charles out to explain why we couldn't all fit in the elementary school library. But basically I've given up that approach because I figure it's a drop in the water here and a drop in the water there, and it really wasn't making a difference. In Canada, in any one year, there's 28,000 people who supervise student teachers. And that's extraordinary. That's what we're trying to do, and it's almost impossible. So doing 6 here and 12 over there, and so I really felt I was having no effect other than this very little ripple on the work of school advisors. So we wondered a couple of years ago what would happen if school advisors played a greater part in their own professional development, and this is turning things on their head, right? What would happen if the school advisors actually started doing something themselves? Now, I've worked with school advisors, absolutely wonderful, so it's not a criticism of school advisors. And so we explored this starting 4 years ago. We thought, what would happen if you provided a space for school advisors to engage in a substantive and sustained conversation about their work? We allowed teachers' inquisitiveness to provide the direction of the conversation, and we provided the resources to support their inquiry. Wouldn't that be an interesting thing to do? Walk into a school district, say, of all the people here working with school advisors, is there a group of you want to get together and you want to inquire into your own practice? And that's literally what we did. And we had a SHIRK grant, so we said we would supply any resources that you wanted to do for that inquiry. And then we sat at the table. You know, do you want to do interviews with student teachers? Do you want to, whatever you want to do, we will do it. But we weren't prepared to direct the inquiry. You had to do it it's about you, what you want to do. And so the talk today is a little bit about what came out of that experiment. And it was in the Richmond School District 38. We established what we eventually called a school advisor network. And this was their expression, which I've now used on my SHIRK grant, development of the profession, not just professional development, which is sort of an interesting way. After a couple of years, they came to that point. They said, this is what we're doing. We're not just coming along and asking you to do professional development like I used to do. We're interested in the development of the profession. In 4 years, they met 37 times voluntarily, this group of people, and worked on inquiring into their practice. Now, if we just stop there, that's extraordinary in and of itself. I think that's just a delightful thing. It ranged from about 8 to 25 people at different meetings over those years who would come along. What happened? What we thought might happen is we would start off in the first year in this circle here, get the core group, and then we would get more members and grow, and we would grow and have this big idea. There'd be a big pool of school advisors. It was interesting if you look at complexity theory, and things don't actually work that way. This is what actually happened, which is sort of curious. We started off with a core group. Some retired, some moved on to other districts. And then they had associate members who weren't interested in coming to the regular meetings, but were actually interested in what we were doing. And so they stayed in touch with the group. And then some of these other people then became the core members of the group. So it was sort of interesting. I was imagining this was going to be the case and we'd have to get a bigger and bigger room to actually have the meetings. But actually this turned out to be the case. There was always sort of this core group of people who came along. We've actually now got a lady from the Muslim school in Richmond who's coming along. I don't know how she really found out about us, but she was interested in joining the group. So we said, well, we just won't tell the school district. So that's what's happened over the years. So we actually have a network that looks like this. Not everybody committed and working and working and working, but these people having these links, and these folks have actually run workshops in the district for the teachers themselves off their own bat. So that's interesting. They've actually done this in the Richmond School District. What did the network do? Well, they talked and talked and talked. If you open up that door, people love talking, as I'm doing right now. They started to map out issues that were important to them, and then began to give some structure to those issues. And I'm going to talk about one of those structures they came across called the mentoring profile inventory, and it was literally built from the ground up, from their ideas. Okay. So the first question really they asked themselves, what does the practicum look like from the advisor's perspective? And then they just talked. And Valerie Triggs was there, and John Collins, colleague of Dan, and myself and Galen at different times, and we just took notes. We literally just they asked us some questions. The first couple of sessions, actually, there was a bit of university bashing, as you might understand. There's a few people who were a bit upset about the university. They actually left the group. They didn't stick around because they thought they'd had their say. Then the core group actually were interested in what this was about. And so over the course of about 4 or 5 months, when we actually looked at the list of things they generated 200 different items related to the work of school advisors. That's actually a lot of talking by the time you actually identify all those. And I mean, here are some of them. I feel like some of these you know about. We have a responsibility, blah, 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 university practicum policy, unclear. These are all the sorts of, as we started to distill them down into statements, this is what it looked like. So we had these 200 statements, and what we decided to do was actually put them all on bits of paper, the university team, in consultation with the group, and said, well, let's try and make sense of these, and we'll do a brainstorm and clustering exercise with them, okay? To find out what was actually going on here. And so we asked them, would you sit down and then in your group, or not in your group, we actually did individually first, here's all these slips of paper, shuffle them all out on the table and try and bring them into areas, then actually give them a label and say, what does that group represent? So we were trying to get a sense of what they were saying in these various clusters. And I can't believe they actually did this, by the way. They did this at 4:30 after school. Can you imagine someone, we did it in 2 groups, one group of 100 and another group of 100. They actually sat there and did this. I mean, they wanted to do it. They were so excited about doing it. We couldn't hold them back at that point. So you can see why it was so easy to go to visit this group. It wasn't an effort to go down there and be with them. It was interesting, at the end of the day, and I'm skipping over a whole bunch of stuff here, by the way. At the end of the day, there was a big cluster that generally all the things that motivated them to work with student teachers. And then there's a big cluster, all the things that challenged them in their work with student teachers. You could actually discern those 2 clusters, which is interesting of itself. After that conversation, that's where we got into. And we thought what we would do with that there's lots of different things you can do with those. It would be interesting to work with the district on some of those issues and see whether we could actually try and tackle them or drill down as a term these days. What we decided to do with the group was actually try and generate some sort of inventory or survey that would enable people to have a sense of how they rated on these various items. And this is why this is the very quick part. This is 4 years and what we did over 4 years with the group, coming backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards. And we just got the paper accepted. Oh, thank goodness for that. So we're finally there. I'm not going to go through the statistical piece. After we got those items, we did all sorts of things with the items and ended up with something that looks like this. If you go and do this instrument, it's 62 items at the moment, collapsed from 84, etc., etc. There's 62 items. You answer the 62 items. It comes back immediately, it's on the web, comes up and it'll give you a sheet that is represented 8 motivator bars and that should be 6. Sorry, 6 challenge bars here. And then it'll rate you along here the extent to which you are motivated on that particular cluster, this cluster, this cluster, this cluster, etc. Looks something like this when you go to do it on the web. There's a nice introductory page. It's pretty simple. You can pick one or the other of these. There's the survey button. So if we go and take the survey now, there's a bit of demographic information on the front. And then it just got these 62 items. You just click on not, media, moderate, etc. for each of these items. You just work your way through. It takes you about 12 minutes. Yep.
Can you read a couple of examples?
Yep. Yep, sorry. Supervising student teachers provides me with pleasure and enjoyment. Allowing flexibility for student teachers to develop at different rates. Not important, slightly important, moderately important, significant, critical. And you just go, walk your way through them. Get to the last page, there's a bit more information we ask from you, more demographic information. And what it comes back with is that is a result sheet which would green bars will be the motivators, orange bars are the challenge, and then these will just be stretched out at different lengths along here, telling you the strength to which you are responding to that particular cluster within this inventory. And this would become a little bit clearer if I just show you that. So there's someone from New Zealand this last week, actually. What are we up to? I've lost track. Actually on the weekend. That's a bit easier there now, Linda, anyway, you can read some of that. So it gives you a bit of a sense, and you can see, I mean, if we just look at this, hi Laurie, this suggests that this person's fairly motivated in a number of dimensions with respect to their work, and they certainly are they see some things as challenges as well. And so what this is starting to do is starting to make explicit aspects of their work that might otherwise remain tacit or not really problematized in a particular way. So it's interesting. Not particularly motivated in terms of developing a professional community, really interested in renewing the profession, likes to be in the practical context, that's really important to this particular teacher. This is interesting, time out to monitor pupil learning is actually an interesting element of this person's work with student teachers.
What's the vertical bar on each of those?
That's the average for BC, the BC population, yeah. What we did when we did the instrument, we averaged it on we had 521 people in BC who did the instrument, and then we got the averages, and so we put the little black line to say where the averages are for BC, just if you're interested. This one's from New Zealand.
So they get a normative read as well as a idiographic read.
Yeah. By the way, developing this particular page took forever to find a graphical way to represent this information. You think it was quite straightforward. It wasn't anything like that at all. We had Excel charts and all sorts of things, and everyone, the group kept tearing them up and saying, go away, this is no good, here's another idea, etc., etc.
What does the school advisor as a subspecialty?
Right. That's suggesting that a teacher is not a teacher. In fact, to be a school advisor is actually a specialist part of the work in education. And so the instrument asks questions that actually start to target, do you think you actually need preparation and skills and abilities to do this work, or is it something that anyone can do? It's, that's interesting, yeah. Oh, is that the one? Yeah. This person is concerned that there's actually not more emphasis given to the fact that this is actually a specialty in teaching. You have to have a master's to be administrators, do you? Or you have to at least be starting your master's? Yeah, and to be a school advisor, you don't really need to put up your hand and...
3 to 4 years teaching.
3 to 4? Okay, that's good. I'm going to run through one element of this which is sort of interesting, and I'm not going to pull the whole instrument apart. Let's see if we looked at this table like this. Motivation, highly motivated to be a school advisor, and lots and lots of challenges at the same time. Not very motivated, lots of challenges. High motivation, low challenge. What would it look like? It'd make it a bit easier if I do this. So if your green and orange bars are really long, you might be in this area, right? Highly motivated and also highly challenged in what I do. Interesting person that. It'd be interesting to chat to that person. What would you like for UBC? What would you think would be an ideal? What would you think? Highly motivated is probably good, so it's probably up there. And then maybe, I mean, it was interesting, I've had debates as I've done this, how people now challenge me about what might be an appropriate quadrant. But probably this is not where you want to be. Very low motivation, and I think this job is just killing me. Okay? This is an interesting one. Not very motivated, not very challenged, you know. Whatever. Yeah, that's right, yeah. It's the student teacher somewhere, I don't really know where. You can see some of the fun we have with this when we actually do some work. We actually decided to do another part of the instrument, and how do you represent these on an easy way for teachers to really get a read on it. We called this balanced and balanced, right? We called this highly challenged, not very motivated. Highly motivated, not very challenged, and we tried to actually graphically represent that along the bottom of the chart. So we actually got a bubble here that actually goes into sectors, and you know, this is very motivated and not very highly challenged, so that people can look at it very quickly. And I'm going to explore one more part of that. Oh, right. That's the balance on that part and that part. Boom. So you get your bars, and you get this little graphic there that says what we did. Like we selected the most critical items in these two areas to create this bubble down here. It just so happens, and I'm skipping a whole lot of stuff here, but the motivators actually break down into self and other, which you might not, is not a huge surprise, but it was interesting. They really actually broke out quite clearly. Am I motivated to do this because of myself? Because I've got a Year 7 camp coming this year, and I'm going to be really busy, so I'll take a student teacher because that'd be really handy. Right? Or am I motivated by myself because it's a professional development, or do I like helping other people, and that's why I'm actually in this, working as a school advisor, etc., etc. There's a whole lot of dimensions. This one's interesting. The challenge ones actually broke down into interpersonal challenge with communication, getting on with people, etc., etc. And systemic has to do with UBC doesn't provide me with good enough forms. I don't get the handbook's not very useful for me. I'm having challenges ringing up my faculty advisor. So the challenges actually broke into sort of interpersonal issues and then systemic issues. And we decided to try and represent those down there too, and you can get the same sort of visual. If you went back, and I'm not going to do all the bars again, but you can actually break the circle down. You could say, here's somebody, what have we got here? We've got motivation, other, right. High motivation for self, right? And low for other. Is that right? Yeah, right. And so we actually put the names on them along the bottom. I'll skip. We did the same thing for interpersonal. And here's a real one from somebody, the same one I just showed you from New Zealand. This person, as you can see, and we've actually, I don't know whether these numbers here are very good or not, but anyway, we put them in there for the moment to see how people react. This person is highly motivated and has a number of challenges that they see in their work. This person believes that the systemic challenges are greater than their interpersonal challenges at the moment, but they obviously have some. Hello, Peter. And this person over here says that I'm more motivated in my work with school advisors by helping other people than I am in just getting things out of it for myself. So this is a conversation that we never usually have with school advisors, and the instrument helps people have that sort of conversation. So that's the instrument, and you've got the gist of it. What would it look like if I gave you a blank sheet and said colour it in? That would be a good exercise. Give you a green and orange pen. Might it look like this? And this is where it started all sort of debates, by the way, but I'm just going to have a go at it. Let's say we want people that are highly motivated. Let's say we want them not too challenged. We like them to have a degree of challenge, but not totally challenged in some regards. Is it good to be relatively balanced? You get a lot out of it yourself and you like to give a lot to the others? Just putting it out there. the challenges, would you like to have the challenges balanced so that they're not extreme? One's not overweighing the other, maybe. And would you like to see this happening, at least the green circle here, the green sector larger than the orange sector, in the way we work with school advisors? I'm putting it at you, and people have said, well, we'd like to see some other different variations. I'm just suggesting that this might be a possibility. What we can do, of course, is we can get all the profiles. What happens when you do it online, if you want to go do it online, it gets put in the database. You get to do it for nothing. It's freely available on the web. And what we do, we keep all the collective results. Okay? And then what we do, we start to aggregate them and see what a cohort of school advisors thinks in this particular jurisdiction. And so we have a sense now of how they differ between we're going to have a sense when we actually do more work with how they differ across jurisdictions. It would be an interesting needs assessment instrument on a program in some regards. How well are we doing on practicum? Give our blah, blah, blah. Here are two different ones that were done last week. They're not from here. They're not from Canada. I just thought I'd show them to you because it goes to show that people do respond differently to the instrument and give you some feedback on different parts. Yeah. Typically, people tend to be more motivated than challenged overall. We're thinking of this in some senses, a sense of agency in their work with school advisors. People who have a sense of agency. That's the same there. This is sort of interesting.
Tony, can you tell us more about the normative data on BC and whether these were all volunteers and why they took it, how many of them they were, how long ago it
Yeah, we sent to 1,700 school advisors and we got, was it 521 back that we could actually use. This was done 2 years ago, or no, not quite 2 years ago, as part of we tested it with all the school advisors in the Richmond School District and got 140 back the first time. Then we sent to the province and we followed it up. So that's the sort of data that we're relying on for that. And we can break that down into district. We haven't tried to break it down to district yet. We're still working on the instrument, but that gives you a bit of a sense. Hopefully all the black lines are in the same place on both graphs. Somebody said, would you make this dynamic, right, as the sample grows? But at the moment we've just left it at the BC population. I don't know whether it's useful or even useful there, but.
Can you tell which university they're affiliated with when they responded?
No, we didn't ask that. No, we did all the UBC groups. You will be able to in the future. What we've done with the instrument now is, because we didn't want to do all the work ourselves, you can actually go online. Say if Peter Grimmett, if he's still at SFU and he wanted to do it with SFU, you can go online, you can pick your own code, SFU 2011, and then tell all your advisors to put in SFU 2011 when they do the thing. And then that's a cluster, we can actually pull that out for you. Or China, Changchun, or the Netherlands, or wherever you're from. So that's the way we actually, so we didn't do it in this one just to get the instrument up and running, but you'll be able to differentiate between jurisdictions based on the project codes. And what happens, you can come online as a coordinator with your own project code and you can get all the aggregate data off yourself. You don't have to come back to us. It's all, breaks it down in terms of male and female and grade level and those sorts of things. There's a bunch of other charts in the background that start to break it up. But this is still in the evolutionary stage actually. We call it embryonic at the moment.
Is it anonymized when people go in and download their own data?
Yeah. What happens when you do it, it immediately comes up on the screen and you get sent an email. And so you've got access to it later on when you go home. You can still have a look at the thing. I mean, the ideal thing is a group of people, they all do it before they come to the session, like you said. And then you actually have a discussion on it. And if anyone's worked with Dan's TPI, that's brilliant. If it ever is as good as Dan's 100,000 responses on the TPI plus, that'd be brilliant. We're just trying to think, at the moment we're putting another grant to try and actually keep working with this because it's actually got a bit of traction. Curiously, there's different people in different parts of the world that are interested in doing this. We think it's prior to now, there's only one other instrument called Glickman Supervisory Belief Index that you can do. We did that on a sample of 700 people in BC and found that it pretty much returns a set of random numbers. And I'd been using it for a number of years as an instrument. It had actually been used for research and all sorts of things, actually, as it turned out. And I wrote to Glickman. Some of you might know Carl Glickman. And he wrote back to me and I said, the first time we did the stats on it, I thought there was something wrong. And I wrote to Carl Glickman. I said, we're having trouble with the instrument. And here are the results. I don't want to tell anyone about it because this is what we're getting. And he said, that's interesting. He sent me all this information that he'd done, but there was no sort of real meaty stuff. And then we did another statistical analysis with another statistician, by the way. Got the same results. The first one I'd done with a grad student. Always trust your grad students, by the way. Grad student actually came up with the result and I thought, oh, I don't know. Deal with a statistician, the results were the same. Wrote back to Glickman and said it happened again. Glickman then said it was never meant to be anything other than a values clarification exercise. Now, it's not written that way in the textbook, not the way I read the textbook. Peter's probably familiar with it. And it's certainly been used for research. And when we did the test, we found it purports to break people up into 3 areas: collaborative, directive, and non-directive. We argue that it's almost a random set of numbers that come back out of the instrument based on a sample of 700 people. So this is why this is the only other instrument that I know of, and you might know of some, that a school advisor can come in the privacy of their own office, in their classroom, whatever, and just have a go at this and get some information about. Now, I don't have a lot. I'm highly suspicious of instruments to start off with. In any case, we're not going to say this is the be-all and end-all, but at least it starts the conversation. Different way of thinking about practice. There is a conversation that can be had about some of the elements now, at least. And it does start to make explicit some of the underlying assumptions, because a whole lot of those things those teachers talked about, they never have that conversation when we were constructing it. You never hear half those things, but they came out. So at least they have some place in the instrument at the moment, the inventory. We think that if you put them together, you might be able to find out what's the situation at SFU with their practicum. I mean, I'm just having a shot. It's interesting because we have done a little test in Australia, and there are significant differences on some of those dimensions between Australia and Canada, Australia and BC, Victoria and British Columbia, Monash University and UBC. I'm getting more specific for you statisticians in the room. It does give you a bit of feedback. It could actually be a needs assessment tool, potentially. And the sort of interesting one we're interested in doing, why we're pursuing this, is we think there's some interesting comparative analysis data. And if you remember, Gertz once said that, what did Gertz say? Does anyone remember? It's a test. Gertz said that making the familiar strange and the strange familiar. It was Gertz, wasn't it? Didn't Gertz say that? Yes.
What did he say?
I mumbled it, sorry. Make the strange familiar and the familiar strange. Clifford, right, thank you. I think on a first name basis. So comparative analysis have the potential for us to look at our practice, say at UBC, if we see that things might be happening in Australia or in a context that are similar to our context. The Netherlands actually are translating the instrument at the moment. They asked us, could they translate it into, what do they speak in the Netherlands? Dutch? Thank you. And so they actually translate it because they actually want to use it. And I said, if you translate it, we'll try and put it on the web for you. It would be interesting to see, just out of curiosity. Anyway, it's not till we do that that we'll know where that might take us. But that's all I got today, I think. I told you you'd be out early. Thank you very much. You can turn the camera off. Oh, I guess you can't.
Tony, can I ask you another question
Yep.
about this? One of the things it invites is for a student that's going out to take it as well on themselves, and once they get some kind of familiarity with this, and then have a conversation with their school advisor. Is that at all feasible?
Absolutely, yeah.
Because it seems like it's a conversational tool.
Yeah.
But a conversation for whom about what invites different conversations.
Yes.
And that might be one.
Yeah. Yeah, we haven't tried it with student teachers out of curiosity. Faculty advisors have tried it. I've had a number of faculty advisors give it a run. I mean, it's been written for school advisors, folks in schools, because the items are actually worded that way. Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. But if you stay tuned, we might have some more interesting stuff. Yeah.
Tony, have you given the inventory to school advisors prior to their experience with teacher candidates?
No, no. I haven't differentiated on that. Yeah. Do you mean ones that haven't had teacher candidates?
And
No.
then having a teacher candidate after the fact?
No, it's interesting. Yeah. No, this is actually just sort of relatively hot off the press. We haven't even got that far. Yeah.
I wonder what you would get if you were to give the instrument to a school advisor who's just had a difficult experience,
Beautiful, yeah,
right?
yeah.
And if you had a pre
Absolutely,
and post,
yeah.
that could be very interesting.
Yeah, you can see that red circle changing. Yeah.
Yes, but I wonder if the green wouldn't also change, because
Yeah,
you have to be very, very motivated
Yeah.
to deal with the
yeah.
challenges.
That's a really neat idea, Cindy, and especially if, let's say, UBC was going to institute some kind of innovation or change or some implementation of things to make it better, and that you had a cohort of supervisors that you could follow over time to see what effect it might show on this, not just one person, but everyone who was involved in the change, whatever that would be.
Yeah, yeah. Track the motivations and challenges, see whether it shifts. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's what we've been thinking about. Yeah.
Was there anything in this where there was a relationship between the sponsor teacher and the faculty advisor? Was that looked at?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We actually took out a number of the items that really didn't pertain to what we were doing here. Some of them were more esoteric and would have been hard to put in. But there is that part. There is an element there that talks about the relationship, and particularly on the challenge piece, there are items that speak to the relationship with the university and the institution in the context of working with student teachers. Yeah. So it would come up there. Yeah. But there are parts about in the motivating end of I like actually talking to another colleague. Is that valuable, etc. And so people rate that. It's, strongly the case. It doesn't really matter if I see the faculty advisor or not. I'd be quite happy not to see them. Maybe that happens. I don't know. Yeah. Well, Rita.
It's interesting that you're using the word mentoring, because I've actually discouraged people from using it. For me, at least, it doesn't have. It's incongruous with having the summative evaluative expectations that we place on advisors. I'm assuming you disagree with that, and that's why you're using it.
Not necessarily. I mean, there's so many terms that are used. Cooperating teacher, school advisor, school associate, school-based teacher educator, university associate, all those ones, and mentoring. I've almost given up in the literature trying to find a term that works. I mean, it's just a headache. And in the grant I'm writing at the moment, I'm sort of spent half my time thinking which. So we've used mentoring here as a more general term that people across, because we're going beyond our own jurisdiction now, and there is a little thing that says this term means all these other things as well. To try and make it's interesting in some countries that there's one term and everyone knows what the term is, but in North America it's just a dog's breakfast. It's like.
Rita, I've not been part of that conversation to know what you say about that to be true, but one thing I like about the choice of this word is that it suggests you should have some kind of relationship that is closer than just supervision. It has a different intentionality than just supervision, and it has a formative intentionality built into the term that seems to me very important. I know you have to make some trade-offs, but I quite like the implied meaning of this for that reason.
And no, I love that reason.
Yeah.
It's just that I've experienced the opposite is we have more problems with the opposite. When they are so close that they're not, it's harder than to actually be critical of the person.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you have to hold them back or them.
Sure.
The latest sort of meta-analysis of the literature has used the word mentoring. Yeah. So it's interesting. Yeah.
Is it maybe the beginning teachers that's the word there? Because mentoring they're not really teachers yet.
That's true.
So mentoring pre-service teachers or something might give a better connection.
Yeah. No, thank you. I'll think about it. I don't think they made the graphic up for the website now. It's too hard to change. Don't work.
How have you used it? What have you done with it so far?
I have hardly done anything with it. I mean, we've been so immersed in getting it going. To tell you the truth, to go on the web, it was supposed to be, the latest iteration was supposed to be done 5 months ago. And it's taken, I mean, the deadline and everything is 5 months, the web people and everything, it's taken 5 months. I can't believe, I'd advise you not to do this, by the way. This is just a crazy thing to do. And it takes, I did an early literacy project in Vancouver a couple of years ago, and I remember the teachers coming up to me and saying after 2 years, research is so slow. And that's what it is. It's just, so I haven't really had the chance. We're only just starting to break out and start doing stuff with. This is only the second time I've presented it. I haven't done it. We haven't presented it at all. So it'd be interesting. I mean, I will teach my 432 class, the supervision one, in next January if we get enough people. So that's where I'm going to have a bit of fun with it. Yeah.
There's a lot in here to applaud, but I think one thing that stands out for me is that graphic that gives them both their personal score, absolute, and then a normative comparison at the same time, visually, so readily, so understood, so easily understood. Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah,
I don't know why it took a long time to do it.
Yeah.
But it's good.
Yep. Yeah. We hope it actually has a life beyond just a curiosity that we're using it at the moment. Yeah. We'll find out.
So Tony, on the averages, what does the balance look like between motivation and challenge?
More motivated than challenged.
Yes.
Yeah. Consistent. In fact, the interesting thing happened when we started the conversation with the teachers for about the first 3 months. They talked about challenges, and it just with all these things that were and so we actually were when we did the first run at the instrument. I'm boring it. I'll finish in a minute. Just wave at me. Just wave at me when I've got to stop. Right. We actually put all the motivators at the start, all the items that were motivator items, got people to do the motivators, there's 62 items at the moment. Imagine having 31 at the top, they're all related, and the 31 at the bottom, all challenges. And when we did the test runs with it, people became depressed at the end of the instrument. Because I've been looking at all, and they said, I come away from this instrument, I feel terrible, So what we do, we actually flip between the two of them. We do 8 and 8, 8 and 8, 8 and 8, 8 and 8. I mean, little things like that, that's what's taken the time to actually iron out. But the curiosity is, despite our group having this negative conversation to start off with, consistently in all the areas we've done it, the people are more motivated. Yeah. It would be interesting if we got a whole couple of schools where you have people who haven't done supervision, that'd be interesting to do that, wouldn't it? Because we've only done it with people who supervise student teachers.
I have a question, Tony. Is it mostly done with people who have worked in groups with other school supervisors? Because I was thinking, if you're working in a group and you're highly challenged, you're still highly motivated because you've got the support of your peers.
Yeah.
If you were to do this instrument in isolation, I think it would read very differently.
Yeah, we don't know that data because we just send it to everybody that there was looked after a student teacher at UBC for the main sample. Yeah. But you're right. I mean, there's our groups down in Richmond. Clearly, there's a different relationship because they have a clustering going on, etc.
Is there any way of looking at the data for a first year supervisor?
Yeah. We've actually put down how many years they're super. Yeah.
Be the same, or is it?
We haven't broken that down yet, but you can do that. Yeah. Yeah. There's the 2 pages that I rushed past the front, first and last have a whole lot of demographic information, which we can then go back and comb through the data and pull it apart. But we haven't gone back and made a big fuss about that yet. Rita, you're going to donate money to me?
So you mentioned that you're going to teach the 432.
Yes.
So given what you're learning here, what would you do differently with that course? Given what you said earlier about how we don't get very many people there, should we actually continue that course, and is there something else we should be doing?
That's a good question. The first part is, what would I do with it? I mean, the conversations that we had are so powerful with these folks in Richmond. It was interesting because, I mean, Dan wrote to me, and I only read the email yesterday, and he said to me, you should have got anyone who wants to come should have done the MPI before they came here because we have a different conversation, which was a good idea. I was so busy doing so many other things that I just didn't get that done. So I'm wondering whether we ask the people before they come to the course, would they do the MPI, or do we wait and have the conversation and then get them to do the MPI? So I'm torn between both of them, Rita. And as I say, I'm still a fairly sceptical about instruments in any case, and what they try to say I do. But we will play around with the possibilities in the course. But I'm sort of tempted to get them to do it before they come. I don't know whether you've ever done Dan's TPI. I actually did it with a group of educators that they're in tourism. And I gave them that instrument. It's not dissimilar. It's much better than this one. I couldn't believe when I got to the table with these were tourism educators, and I said, oh, well, you got your thing, and I'm thinking they're going to say I had no idea what this education stuff is. And it was they were into all sorts of conversations, what they were getting out of these interesting, so it was I'm tempted to do it and then have the conversation. Yeah. The course is never the same anyway either. All right, we should release you. Thank you very much for your attention, and have the day off, rest of the day off. Thank you.